Okay, kind of got interrupted there. My husband came home, so I'm going to continue this. So yeah, very uncomfortable around my father. He never had intercourse with me, just fondling, but it was of course bad enough. And after like almost 10 years of that, it's no good. Anyways, as I grew older, I became very bitter towards my parents, especially my father. I didn't want any discipline in any way, shape, or form from him. My mother, my mom was a great mom. She was a rock to me a lot of times. Not a perfect mom, but she taught me how to bake and sew and cuddled with me and sang to me and tickled me, and she was awesome. Awesome. So I had a lot of respect for my mom. Showed her some disrespect, as most teenagers do, but I absolutely loved my mom. Always will love my mom. I had a very special bond with her. But I had been instructed by my mother not to talk about what had happened. I mean, she had a lot of guilt and shame, I'm sure. Not maybe so much guilt, maybe guilt that she hadn't protected me, I guess, but probably mostly really embarrassed and ashamed of what had happened and didn't want her other children to know about it. Um, so I didn't. I just shut up about it for 2 or 3 years after my mom found out. Anyway, so I had grown very, very bitter about it. Can imagine how hard it was for my mom, and still is very hard for my mom to forgive my father for what he had done. She's lost a lot of her children because of this. Um, in some ways, it's still very hard for me to forgive him, but I know that if God wants me to forgive, if I want God to forgive me for things I've done, then I must forgive others. Um, I remember one night, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, I just started bawling when this hit me. Like God was saying to me, if you expect me to forgive you for the things that you have done, and I am far from perfect, I've done lots of wrong things, a lot of stuff I'm not proud of, then you must forgive your father. Because if you have no forgiveness, I'm not welcome in heaven if I'm not forgiving. If I can't forgive others, how on earth do I expect God to forgive me? And the Bible says if you've committed one sin, you've committed them all. And it also says if you hate, you've committed murder. And I have hated many times in my life, so I guess I'm a murderer. Oh, where am I here? Um, anyway, so I went to my husband and I told him that what God had said to me, and I was bawling to him, and he said, then you got to tell him. You've got to forgive him. You got to go and tell him. So I did. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. So when I was 13 years old, I changed dramatically. I began smoking, drinking, running away. I started getting into bars at 13. My one full brother introduced me to hitchhiking, and I eventually hitchhiked alone at 13 years old. I'd hitchhike into town and then meet up with my brother and go to the bars and get drunk and all that fun stuff, which led to an awful lot of trouble. At 14 years old, I broke into a cottage down the road from our home with a friend of mine at the time. We were looking for alcohol but didn't find any. The only thing that I took from that house was a small horse figurine, just a tiny little porcelain horse. So my friend went back and told her mother what we had done, and eventually I was charged with that. I was charged with break, enter, and theft. I was put on probation for a year. I ended up breaking my probation and I received 6 months of open custody. This began with a short term in a maximum security open custody for young offenders under 16, which really sucked. It was just like jail. And then they put me into a group home that had really strict rules and not much freedom. And if I broke the rules, then they would just send me back to that secure facility. But I stuck it out, and I think I broke the rules a couple of times, but I didn't get sent back. They kind of let it slide. Um, Anyways, while in this home, my foster mother, I'll call her, was talking to another girl about the sexual abuse that she had suffered. And then my foster mother looked at me and asked me if anything like that ever happened to me. And at first I said no. I was terrified. I felt like a deer caught in the headlights. I just froze. And anyways, eventually it all came out. I told her everything. I guess I just had to get it off my chest. And of course, she was obligated to notify the authorities. So my father was arrested and charged for that sexual abuse. I was terrified. I didn't even want to phone my mom. I remember just thinking, they're going to hate me. They're going to hate my guts. And I felt like the bad guy in all of it. I felt like the one that had done something wrong. I felt like I betrayed my parents in this way. Anyways, my mother did not show me the anger that I thought she was going to show me. She was pretty compassionate about it. They went through an awful lot. They ended up losing their home. They had to pay for lawyers. Long story, anyways. But he pled guilty, so I thank God didn't have to go through this long court procedure. And they gave my father, a high school teacher, 1 year probation, same as what I got for breaking into that cottage and stealing that little porcelain horse. One little thing that I did. He got the same as me for the almost 10 years of sexual abuse. And he lost his job for that 1 year. He was back to work the next year. After 6 months of open custody for me, they sent me back home to live with my parents. I think I was 14, 15. And I lived in a cloud most of that time. I skipped school, I drank, I did drugs, I smoked pot, hash, did LSD, took magic mushrooms, took any pills that were given to me. I, to this day, don't know what I took. I would have done any kind of drug offered to me to kill the pain that I had deep inside. I just was one hurting unit. And I'd always make sure that I had pot or hash or something to smoke, because I felt that was the only way that I could tolerate being at home for a weekend with my parents. At 16 years old, I met my future husband and best friend, Paul. Paul had come from a broken home. His mother had been an alcoholic for years, and she left his father twice, so he's gone through, at that point, 2 separations between his parents. He was a very angry boy. And I know one story, he told me that when they were breaking up, they were going to get a divorce. He went into their filing cabinet and got their marriage certificate and everything out, and he threw it in their face, and he just said, what is this? You guys made a covenant before God. So he went through his own pain, a lot of anger. He became bitter towards women. But both his parents worked, and they provided well for him. He also lived in a home in the country, loved to fish, loved all the same things that I did as a kid. We would have been like the best of friends then, as well as now. We were together for 2 short weeks before getting into trouble with the law. We took off with my brother, my one full brother. Got into some trouble. We were on the streets during that time. We broke into a home. And when we went to leave, the lady that owned the house was driving in the driveway, and we ran back to her house, took off. Cops found us. This was in Kitchener, Ontario. Assaulted a cab driver to get there. We were on the run for that. It was just an absolute mess. I'm not proud of any of this, and I know that my brother is not proud. My brother he's getting baptized next week. We've all made mistakes. We came from a hell of a past. I am not going to make little of my past at all. I don't use it as a crutch. I've gotten past it. I look forward. It's in my past. I am not letting it hold me down. I'm going to make an awesome future for myself. Anyway, so we all got sentenced to a year in prison. For about 6 months, I got away with sending letters to my friend back home, who would take my name off the envelope, put her name on it, mail the letter to Paul, because we weren't supposed to be in contact, and then vice versa. He would mail letters back to her, and then she would mail them to me. So we kept in contact for about 6 months until I finally got busted. So we lost contact. So after 9 months of my term, I was released, and eventually Paul and I hooked back up. We found each other. We were still living the hardcore party sort of lifestyle. At 17 years old, I became pregnant with our daughter, Amber. And this was like hitting a brick at 200 miles an hour. Getting pregnant with Amber brought me back to reality, and it made me really want to change my life. I was now responsible for this little unborn baby inside of me. I remember one point in my life, I had my niece, one of my sister's daughters, who was a month older than me. We're so close in age. I have lots of nieces and nephews older than me because I'm the youngest of 12 kids. But this particular girl came to me one time. I had been living with her mother at the time, and my brother lived right next door, and she had gone over and was smoking pot with them. And my 16-year-old niece came crying, bawling. Her heart was broken. And she said to me, I know my mom's doing it. I know she's smoking dope. And I just felt so much compassion for her that she was going through that. And I thought to myself when I got pregnant, I don't want to be that kind of mom. I don't want to be that kind of mom. I want to be a good mom. Paul had a lot harder time changing than I did. Of course, he wasn't the one carrying this baby. He was, still full tilt, partying, drugs, everything. He felt like his life was over. And he still had a negative attitude towards women, and he was far from settling down. So he suggested that I have an abortion. I was horrified at the thought of that. There was no way I was going to abort this unborn baby, and I was completely against it. Paul and I broke up several times during that pregnancy. I went through total hell. I felt so alone. I remember crying outside of my high school at nighttime, sobbing, my belly out to here. I was 8 months pregnant at that time,